Brilliant. So Catherine, we got Catherine on board there in the last few minutes as well, so delighted to see her. And Alex, if you want to get your screen teed up there, you're up next. So Alex, you might remember, some of you might know from his days in Birdwatch Ireland. He was there for a long time, Birdwatch veteran. He was the Farmland Senior Conservation Advisor, Farmland Birds. Since left and is now with Board Namona, so he's a full-on bug man. But he would have been around Lough Boora a long time with his Birdwatch Ireland hat on, and knows every nook and cranny in the place and everything else. So exciting news today, Board Namona and stuff with the people and peatlands life project announced and stuff. So busy days ahead for those guys. And but for now we're talking about Boora predominantly, and looking forward to this from Alex. So Alex,
thanks very much, Ricky. And yeah, hello everybody. It's great to be speaking to you through this forum now, I have to say. And yeah, I've been tasked with talking about Lough Boora Discovery Park in 5 minutes, which is a bit of a challenge. It's a fair size of site. I mean, following on quite nicely from Chris's presentation there, that Lough Boora would be a site where Board Namona did go in, where they did harvest the peat. And the peat was largely cut away from the majority of the Lough Boora site. So you were left with this kind of post-industrial, post-apocalyptic, if you will, bare peat landscape. And this is just a very quick talk about how, even in such a damaged environment, you know, biodiversity, wildlife has returned, and it's really become quite a spectacular place to visit. So this is the Lough Boora Discovery Park, an aerial photograph covering a good chunk of the bogs in and around the Boora complex. Most people would be familiar here in the centre. This is the sort of the core area of the lakes. The visitor centre is just up here, and the sculpture park is down in this area. But of course, Lough Boora extends much more substantially out from this area. Up to the north, we have the wetlands at Tyrone, and this is one of the first areas which were cut away and which were rehabilitated, the drains being blocked and the landscape allowed to flood. But we'd also could head over towards Drina, towards the west of the site, another extensive wetland area there on bare peat cutaway, and then right away through Derry Brat, through the whole of Boora, heading out towards Finnemoors over in the south east of the Parkland site. And then this is on the road, I think just south of this picture. This is the Kilcormac-Tullamore Road. So this is slap bang in the Midlands of Offaly, in serious bog country. And as you can see from the aerial photograph there, you'll remember back to the picture that Chris showed with all the lines going across. And these are the lines here. These are the fields, the production fields from which they were harvesting peat. And like I say, the majority of Boora would have been in production. There's small areas of bog remnants. This northern chunk here of Nogus, there's a small area of bog remnant there, which was never milled, never in production. But by and large, majority of Boora was in production in one form or another. And the production has now all ceased. And of course, this is some very positive news, that last month Board Namona announced it was now ceasing all peat harvesting operations. So Board Namona is now no longer harvesting peat from any sites. And indeed, as Ricky said, we have announcement today of funding for a life project, people in peatlands, but we're also engaged quite positively, I think, in doing rehabilitation work across the entirety of our holding, which is a requirement of our EPA licenses to extract peat. But anyway, that's by the by. Let's talk about Lough Boora, which I think really has been a bit of a jewel in the crown of Board Namona's rehabilitation. It's a site which is incredibly popular for lots and lots of different reasons. It's as a naturalist, I think it's a wonderful place to go bird watching, to look at insects, to go for a walk, to go for a stroll. I'm very fortunate that my office is just situated up here, just behind this chunk of woodland. So when I'm allowed back in the office, and obviously we've been at home, working from home for the last 9 months because of COVID, and I think I'm probably allowed to say that, although I don't mind working from home, that I would be quite keen. It's not the worst place in the world to go and work and have a wander around at your lunchtime, to go and walk around parts of the parklands. It's a wonderful place for wildlife. It's a wonderful place for birds. It's also a wonderful place for people. That there's a hugely There's a very good visitor centre that was built there just a couple of years ago, and it's very, very popular. The cafe, there's cycle hire there, and it really does bring people into the area, and from far and wide it's become a very popular destination for people to visit. And who would have thought that a bit of bog in West-Offaly would have attracted so many people to come and enjoy the outdoors, and you know, to walk, to cycle, to run, to do some bird watching, connect with nature. The sculpture as well, obviously, sculpture in the parklands is very important to bringing people in as well. So it's a fantastic site for people to visit, and people really now, I suspect, are at the core of a lot of what we do there. And you can see there's a number of events that are put on. We would have walks when we're allowed, obviously, and normally in a normal year, we would be having walks around the site. There would be lots of events put on around the parklands as well, and they can be very, very popular. With various people for various different reasons. But nevertheless, even though the centre of the parkland is very, very popular, there's some wonderful places which you can visit, which are still very, very quiet, where people don't commonly go. Tyrone Wetlands would be a great example. It could be quite quiet, and there's some nice, it pays to try and find a few walks and tracks around there, but when you do, it can reap real rewards in terms of the wildlife that you see. You know, the bird lists for these sites is fantastic, as indeed is a lot of the wildlife. And I think possibly the best example of this would have been back in 2012, the National Biodiversity Data Centre BioBlitz event was held at Boora, when we didn't quite hit 1,000 species, but at 940, I think we were very, very happy with the number of species that we recorded, particularly, and again, to re-emphasize, this is a post-industrial peatland site. A lot of the wildlife there has come in naturally. And so it's really, really fantastic to see that amount of wildlife coming into a site like this. It's just a sign, I suppose, of how resilient wildlife can be. And it's great hope for the future that when you have a site such as Boora would have been, following the peat production times, that even without, and you know, it's huge credit to the Board and Mona staff who went and did a lot of the work there, led largely by Tom Egan, but you know, it was only, so I suppose, in the last 10 years, and Boora's been around for 40 years, it's been rehabbed for nearly 40 years at this stage, and some of the habitats certainly are indicative of that length of time.
A couple of minutes there, Alex.
Fine, thanks, Ricky. Indicative of that length of time. And I think it's fantastic that now, you know, in Board and Mona, we have a real focus now in ecology. We have an ecology team, which I'm part of, originally led by Catherine Farrell, now led by Mark McCorry. And with our expertise, I would hope we can do an awful lot more informed support in terms of the rehabilitating of our peatlands. And Boora continues to evolve and develop, and we have, we're hopeful to go into Boora again this year to rehabilitate some of the areas that are still bare. So it's a landscape that's going to continue to evolve and continue to develop, and hopefully continue to be a really, really important place for birds, for wildlife, and obviously for people to come and enjoy them. So that's it there. Thank you.
Deadly, thanks. That's great, Alex. Very good, nice and neatly timed. Grant, I just remind everyone the Q&A is open below, and if you want to chat or just say anything, use the chat column. And I forgot to actually put the poll out there. I'll do that during the next speaker. So next.